unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand.
So,
recording in progress.
Thank you, Prajwal, for the introduction. So, we will continue with this discussion of the Purusha Sukta. As I mentioned earlier, it is one of the most important and one of the most profound suktas of Rigveda Samhita. I think I mentioned earlier, the same Purusha Sukta is found in with slight differences in other Vedic traditions like Taittiriya Aranyaka, which is Yajurveda tradition, and also in the Atharva Veda, and in a somewhat in a scattered form in the Samaveda. But whenever we discuss about the authenticity of a Vedic hymn, we often refer to the Rigveda for several reasons. And one reason is Rigveda is considered to be the oldest and the most authentic, because many of the verses and suktas, so remember sukta means hymns, H-Y-M-S, hymns, are found in other Vedas also. So you find sometimes Samaveda, for example, has a large number of verses taken from Rigveda Samhita. So that's why when we talk about different versions of the same sukta in different Vedas, we normally consider the Rigvedic version to be the most authentic. And I think I mentioned in the last session that every sukta has got a rishi, a chandas, and devata. So you often find in many printed books, even for each mantra means somewhat like a verse. This mantra is not necessarily in a specified metrical form, but there are many Vedic mantras which are maybe a combination of both prose and also poem. But most of the Samhitas are more or less in the metrical form. So the rishi is the seer, the sage, to whom a mantra is revealed. So that's the meaning of rishi. Rishi, the sage, to whom that particular specific mantra is revealed. So the rishi or the sage of Purusha Sukta is Narayana. And of course there are different definitions of who a rishi is. Sakshakrita dharmana rishayo babhuhu. So those who have realized the supreme spiritual truth in their life and are practicing that, such great sages are called rishi. So rishi darshana stoman dadaseti avamanyasta dadya devans tapasyamanan brahma swayam. There are many interpretations. I am not going to them because mostly based on Yaska's Nirukta. So anyway, to understand the basic structure of Purusha Sukta, the sage associated with this particular sukta is Narayana. And then Chandas. Chandas is the meter in which the particular hymn is composed. This is very important. The particular meter in which it is composed. So, this Rigveda Anukramanika is there, the important textbook related to the subject. Mantranam Asheya Chandu Devadamit Yajana Adhyapanabhyam Seyo Adhigechadi. So Chanda, in short, it is nothing but meter. And there are many chandas used in the Vedic literature. You should remember, generally speaking, in modern Indian vernacular literature, you find the presence of two types of meters. One is called Dravida Vrtas, means metrical forms not directly linked to Vedic tradition, mostly vernacular forms. And then, of course, Indian literature, in modern literature, is predominantly dominated by meters directly linked to Sanskrit language. So, in the Vedas, generally speaking, there are 4 types of meters. One is called Gayatri, Ushnik, Anushtup. Anushtup is the particular meter in which this sukta is composed. Now, one may ask this question, why is all so very important in modern times? I will tell you later. Because if you look at the terrible damage done by translators, mostly Indian, and of course during the 19th century and also in 20th century by Western authors, who naturally didn't get an opportunity to study the Vedas from a traditional teacher, often without understanding some of these important background information. Frequently they translate Vedas, Vedic mantras in a way that may look very, very, very ridiculous. You may have heard of this criticism. Many Indologists and also many even in today's India also you find many, especially those who study Sanskrit literature without going through the traditional training. They say Vedas are all just nomadic, the wild songs sung by nomads. That is the general. It's very. In fact, we should be grateful to Max Muller. Indirectly, he was responsible for removing many of these misunderstandings. And during the late 19th century and also early 20th century, you find a large number of predominantly European Indologists who they made a great contribution by studying many of these aspects of Vedic literature, especially the philosophy, metaphysics, and more importantly, hermeneutics. So, Adijagati, this is another second category. Shakuri, Adishakuri, Kshatashti, then Kriti and Pradima, Upama, Sama, etc. I am not going to those details because they are not directly intelligible in the present context to many of our listeners who may not have the background of going through all these verses. But to be very brief, what I would say, there are 3 important aspects specific to each sukta. That is, the sage, the seer to whom it is revealed, and again the meter in which it is composed, and Devata, the deity to whom the particular hymn is addressed. These are 3 important aspects of every sukta. Now, the sage to whom this Purusha sukta was revealed is Narayana, and the Devata, the deity that it is addressed to, is Purusha. What is Purusha? There are 2 fundamental interpretations about Purusha. One is the cosmic intelligence, if you can think of a monotheistic creator God who is all-pervading. It's called Virat Purusha, the all-pervasive dimension of Brahman. This is one interpretation. But the interpretation that we are going to follow right now is the interpretation of Purusha as the ultimate, all-pervading, immanent, transcendental reality, Atman or Brahman. So now we will come to the first sukta. First mantra of the sukta. Sahasra Sisha Purusha, Sahasrasha Sahasrapad, Sabhumim Vishudo Vrutva, Atyadishtat Dashankulam. So sometimes chant Sahasra Sisha Purusha, like there is a way of chanting, because when we discuss as a philosophical text, we will read it as it is printed, more like a prose, because better understanding. So the other way of chanting, and just a few words, there are different traditions of chanting, different styles of chanting, no less than 10 different ways of rote memorization and chanting the Vedic mantras. They are called Vikritis and Prakritis, different styles, which are mostly must have been designed by the early teachers to make it impossible for anyone to forget what they study when they are small. if you study from verse 1, after that 2, 3, let's say, and then after 1, 3, 5, 7, like that, if you goes, and again you come backward, different ways, So I think I discussed this in my introductory lectures on Rigveda Samhita, Jada, Mala, Shikha, etc. So that's not relevant in the present context. You can listen to my own introduction of Rigveda Samhita, which is available on YouTube, of different styles of Prakritis and Vikritis. Okay, now coming to mantra. So the first word is Sakasrashira Purusha. This Purusha has got 1,000 heads. So many translations 1,000-headed. The 1,000-headed man, using some kind of a Hulk, which is huge and muscular with 1,000 heads. That's the impression that may come to anyone who reads the basic translation, as Purusha is 1,000-headed. But 1,000 here doesn't mean 1,000. It means in Sanskrit asankhya, or innumerable, infinite number. That's the meaning of Sahasram. So, the whole creation is pervaded by the presence of the divine, the fundamental divine. And Sahasraksha, Sahasrava. Again, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet, and Sabhumim Vishwado Vrutva. The great commentator Sayanacharya writes, that Purusha, he is all pervading everywhere. It envelops the entire creation. And the statement is given here is, Sarvata Pariveshtya Vishwataha Vrutva, means it is encompassing, all enveloping, is all embracing, it is all pervading. That's the idea behind. By the word Purusha itself, the implication is this divine reality is immanent. Puri Sete iti Purusha. That Purusha, the divine spark, the divine reality, is residing within this body mechanism, which itself implies that it is distinct from the body, different from the body. So Sarirendriya Vedirektatva, Shankaracharya referring to this particular verse in the commentary says Sarirendriya Vedirektatva, means this, if we suppose somebody tells you are living in a room, it implies that you are not a room. At the same time you are present in the room. But in this context, this Purusha is all pervading. It is not limited to that room. And also, then one important point is mentioned, Desha Angulam Ati Adishtan, mean Atyadishtat Deshangulam. The translation may read, I don't have the English translation in front of me. You can, if you see, you find it projects by 10 inches. That's the Deshangulam. What it means? So the idea is this. After this, I will come to the fundamental principles of interpreting Vedic mantras laid down by the great linguists and philologists of ancient India. So this Purusha is, by the word Purusha, the implication is, it is the immanent spiritual reality present in everything, everywhere. And Sahasrasesha, Sahasraksha, Sahasrapa, 1,000, it is endowed with 1,000 heads, 1,000 feet, 1,000 eyes, means it is all seeing, all pervading, all encompassing. Then it says and again, so everything in this world is the Purusha. Then Atyadishta Dashangulam. Dashangulam Atyadishta means it projects out by 10 inches. Angula means roughly some kind of a calculation in inches. What does it mean? Its transcendental dimension is implied here. It is all pervading, but also it is beyond this all-pervading universe. So, the transcendence aspect or the transcendental dimension of Purusha is implied by the last word atyadishtat dashankulam. Now, after this, let us see what is the justification for this kind of interpretation. Well, to begin with, many of you may have this fundamental idea of interpreting Veda mantras, Adhyalmika, Adhidevika and Adhibhautika. I mean, there are different ways of interpreting the Vedas, which I am not going to detail. But there are certain important points to remember when you read Vedic mantras and words and what and how you interpret the meaning of these words. For example, to begin with, the most fundamental, the earliest attempt to develop a definite hermeneutics in the interpretation of Vedic mantras, that contribution was made by the school of philosophy known as Mimamsakas, or the school of Jaimini, the school of ritualistic philosophers of India. They did not believe that the Vedas talk about it. Vedas taught some kind of a higher philosophy. They did not accept that. Rather, according to them, there's a very, very interesting idea to remember. According to them, Vedas are meant to teach you how to perform certain rituals. That's the only purpose of Vedas. In fact, I told many times earlier that for the first time, a great philosophical idea to Vedic mantras was actually the contribution of Shankaracharya. Because there were many interpreters of Vedic mantras before Shankara, beginning with Yaska, Mahidhara and others. Mostly ritualistic interpreters. So according to them, the only purpose of Vedic mantras were to teach you to perform certain rituals, Vedic rituals. Altogether there are 14 major Vedic rituals, Sapta Haviri Yajnaga, Sapta Soma Yajnaga. I mean, certain types of Vedic rituals which involve offering different auspicious things in the fire. That what you offer is called Havi. It could be milk, honey, it could be what you call yogurt, called dathi. Any of these grains, cooked food, all these used to be offered to different deities with certain mantras for long life, for a progeny, for wealth, mostly for going to heaven. I mean, a good life on this earth and good life in heaven. That was the only purpose of performing these rituals. And Vedas are meant to teach the rituals. So that's why, the Mimamsa's interpretation, Amnayasya Kriyarthatvad Adarthakyam Anadarthanam. Anarthakyam Adarthanam. Amnayasya Kriyarthatvad. So Vedas are, the meaning of Veda performance, Kriyartha, means meant for teaching you how to perform rituals. And if there are any Vedic mantras like Aham Brahmasmi, Tattwamayanandaji, there are many, many great, maybe the greatest of Vedic mantras are not those who teach you how to perform rituals. Rather, they are those mantras which teach you how to go beyond rituals, teaching about the unity and oneness of creation. Upanishads mostly, Vedanta, Jnana Yoga. They are the essence of the Vedas. But Mimamsas won't admit it. They say these Upanishads, all these mantras which teach you the highest spiritual truth, the unity and oneness of creation, they're all just like chocolates. I mean, if you ask children to take some bitter capsules for their health, as a remedy for some illness or disease, you tell children, if you take this capsule, you can take one chocolate candy. So like that, it's called Arthavada. I mean, just to tempt you, well, if you do this, you can get this kind of heaven. So very often many of the even the Mahavakyas like Tattwamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, they are interpreted in the language of going to heaven and becoming one with your deity, and the deity, the Deva, deity will bless you with long life and wonderful, made like a 6-star, 5-star hotel life in heaven. That's all. Remember, you have to remember, heaven in the Mimamsa tradition is different from what it means, what it implies in the Abrahamic tradition. That should be understood very clearly. Heaven has some connection with a spiritual experience in Christian tradition that you don't find in Mimamsa tradition. It's just a good life. So according to Mimamsakas, the criteria Sudhi, Lingam, Vakyam, Pragaranam, Sthanam, Samanyam, Samakhya, Urkasamya. These are the 6 fundamental criteria for judging and interpreting Vedic mantras, called the fundamental hermeneutic principles. That is, the particular indication, the sentence, the context, and also where it is located, and the general meaning, and also the technical vocabulary, all these. Now, based on these, there is a more legible, more intelligible way of analyzing this. So, for example, the sentence, the literal meaning of the word. Remember, we are going to explain that again. The meaning of a word may not be what it means in the dictionary. The Vedic hermeneutics will tell you that there could be 4 different meanings for every word, depending upon the context, upon the technicality, and also the one who uses that, and for what purpose, either in the context of explaining a ritual or in the context of explaining a higher philosophy. For example, come here, for example, Sahasra means infinite, that's the meaning, would be mentioned earlier. Now, that won't be legible if you take the word Sahasra literally, called Yogigartham, etymologically. It means 1000. But 1000 won't fit here because of the context. The context is description of the all-pervading reality in the form of a cosmic person. So, you cannot, it won't be proper to say that Purusha is a male human being with 1000 feet or 1000 heads. It will make absolutely no sense. So, context and also propriety called auchityam, place, time, and of course the proximity and the logical meaning in the context. So if you take all these considerations, you have to admit that Sahasra doesn't mean 1000, it means infinite. Again, there is another mantra, Atyadishta Dashangulam. Here, literal meaning, if you take it, it will be projecting by 10 inches extra. It won't make any sense. If you take all these criteria, context, propriety, and the indications, and different criteria, then you have to admit that it means transcendence. That's only meaning here. Going beyond. This divine reality is present everywhere, present in everything, and also it is a transcendental. If you say that this divine reality, Atman, is present everywhere, then it can become some kind of a pantheism. But that will be totally illogical in the context of, in the particular context of the Vedas here. So issue means transcendental. That's the idea behind. So Of course, I would just to make this a little more clear, I shall explain the 4 different ways of understanding words in the Vedas, and in a broader sense it is also applicable in Sanskrit literature. It is called Yogiga, Rudha, Yoga Rudha and Yogiga Rudha. So I shall try to explain this. The Sanskrit terms may be a bit strange, but I shall try to explain. It becomes very simple. Let us say, for example, you use the word in Sanskrit word Pachaka, it means the one who cooks. Gayaka means the one who sings. That is a proper, in fact that is a, that can be used almost like a proper name. It's not a proper name because it implies what the person does. It's an attempt to explain a person, define a person or an entity in the context of what particular work that person does. For example, Jaladam means not only in the human, it's a human being. Jaladam means something that gives water. Jala means water. Jalam dadadi di jaladam. That's a Sanskrit way of explaining. Something that gives water. Clouds. Now, here, if you try to explain the meaning of it, it's very clear, Jalam dadadi di jaladam. The one which gives water. So it is called jaladam. So the etymological meaning. It is called direct interpretation. Direct interpretation is, or what you call the closest possible interpretation. Because the word itself indicates obviously what the particular entity is or what purpose it serves, or in the context of human beings, what work the person does. Another interpretation, for example, is a simple thing, for example, called Rudham. Rudham means conventional meaning, different from etymological meaning. For example, most of the common names may be in English also. Churchill. It may have some connection with some clergyman in the past, but Churchill is the name of a person. Doesn't mean somebody who goes to a church or somebody linked to a church. So it's very obvious. I'm giving an example from English because it's only possible in a very approximate way. But in Sanskrit, for example, a person may be called Sundara. But a person may not, Sundara actually means handsome or beautiful, whatever. But his figure or form may not do full justice to the real etymological meaning of the particular person. But he has got a name which his father, mother gave him or gave her. So the point is, it is a Rudha meaning, conventional meaning. A meaning which may not necessarily indicate or directly link to the etymology. What the avayavartha means, if you try to analyze the different words are coming together. So it could be Damodara means. So, or there are many Sukumara. Sukumara also means somebody who is good to look at it. But the person may not be like that, could be different. So the etymological meaning can imply one thing, but you may have a common proper name which is conventional meaning that comes to the person, which may not have much to do with what the etymology indicates. So this is one kind of meaning, called Rudha, conventional meaning. Mostly meaning that particular word accumulates because of popular usage. So the meaning that you find in dictionary may have different, that be different maybe after 100 years. The meaning of one word in the earlier editions of Oxford Dictionary may be different from the latest editions. So, because the word gathers new meanings and new implications and new dimensions. Just like modern information technology had already changed the meaning of many words, and also contribute an entirely new vocabulary. I'm just giving an example. Now, these points should be kept in mind when you read the Vedas. I know it doesn't mean that we should stop reading the Vedas, nothing like that. The point is, when we read translations of the Vedas, and if you feel it looks so crude and absolutely meaningless, there are many verbal translations of Vedic mantras which may look almost nonsensical. You find that. But that's because the commentator's meaning doesn't become intelligible to somebody who doesn't know the Sanskrit, or who doesn't take the trouble to read the translations of the commentaries. Commentators have written books on these mantras, giving a philosophical meaning. To give a simple example, Aham Brahmasmi. This is just all you are familiar with this. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. This is simple. It is in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It's a Mahavakya. I am Brahman. What does it mean? It means, according to Vedanta philosophy, it means the reality, the supreme reality, the divine spark that we are inquiring into, that we are meditating upon, is actually non-distinct, non-different from my own self. If you look at yourself, not a physical entity, not a psychophysical mechanism, but something within all of us that is divine, the divine spark, and that divine spark is present everywhere. It is the beginning of existence, it is existence itself, it is also the essence of everything. So this is the real meaning of Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakyam. That Mahavakyam has absolutely no significance according to ritualist philosophers, apart from Arthavada. It's just some kind of temptation for you to perform some rituals. But if you take the literal meaning of it, I am Brahma, that's really, if you translate in English, I am Brahma. And Brahma, you got Brahma is you can find Brahma's picture, and you won't consider it's a compliment if somebody calls you Brahma, because Brahma's picture shows you 4 heads. You don't like to be compared to somebody with the 4 heads, at least. No. So this is what you really understand when you write in English, and also Indian vernacular also. I am Brahman. So you won't say, I am not Brahman, I am Mr. George or John or something. What it means is, when you read Shankaracharya's commentary, what it means, the truth that we are searching, the ultimate truth, the all-pervading, the immanent, the transcendent reality, Atman. That is non-distinct and non-different from my own true self. I am that one. Not the physical body, not this psychophysical mechanism, but the divine spark that is present in me, that gives me existence. That is same as the origin of the universe, the essence of the universe. That's a real meaning. So that's why. So there are different ways of interpreting. Then just to make it a little more interesting, you take the word Udbhid. The word Udbhid. Udbhid actually means something that that thrust upward. Certain insects, certain ants, they from within the earth they move forward. Or some plants, sprouts, they pierce through the outer layer of the soil and they grow into tiny plants. That can be called an Udbhid. That's a literal meaning. You may call it yogic artha, mean literal meaning. But it also is the name of a particular kind of Vedic ritual, Udbhid Yaga, Udbhid Yajna. So we can see this. Again, there are certain words which you can analyze but it has got a specific indication or implication. Vishnu, the word Vishnu. If you look at the dictionary, ordinary Moni Williams or Apte, you find Vishnu. Vishnu is the name of the Hindu Trinity, the one who preserves the universe, the one who is responsible for the preservation of the universe. Vishnu. Krishna was Vishnu's incarnation. So Vishnu is one of the trinities of Hindu pantheon. But the real meaning of Vishnu is Vishnu Vyapnoti Vishnu, the one who is all-pervading. Now, air is all-pervading, but you don't call air Vishnu. When you use the word Vishnu, it only means the deity in a Krishna temple or Vishnu temple. Air also can be called Vishnu if you go to the etymology of it. Vyapnodi, Sarvam Vyapnodi. That means that which is all-pervading, spreading everywhere. Air also is all-pervading, but you don't call air Vishnu. Only the Holy Trinity, Vishnu, is called Vishnu. So, like that, there are different ways of interpreting and finding the true implication of a Vedic Shabda. So, all this should be kept in mind, and the great commentators like Sayana, and later, before that Shankaracharya. Sayana came out 350 or 400 years after Shankaracharya. So they have given different interpretations of these Vedic mantras. If you don't study, at least one can read books which are written according to the interpretations, translations which follow the interpretations of Sayana or Shankaracharya. That will be very intelligible. Otherwise, to be very frank with you, many of the Vedic mantras may look like some poetry of some primitive people, but it is not so. This is an important point, remember. Not only that, another important point is that in Vedic tradition, they used a language which is irregular, and every word can have its root, and root can have different meanings. So anyway, there's another area of Vedic hermeneutics that we'll discuss on a later occasion. So what's the meaning of this first mantra? First of all, this Purusha, the supreme reality, it is the macro dimension of the entire existence. It is also the micro dimension. That's why many commentators, many writers interpret Purusha in the light of Tattwamayanandaji Mahavakya, which is from Chandogya Upanishad. That means that Paramatman, the supreme reality. That is the real implication of this word Purusha. So the next mantra is Purusha eva evedam sarvam. Idam sarvam Purusha eva. All that you see in front of you. I mean the whole cosmos, cosmic experience that we experience during waking state, during dream state, and during deep sleep state is also Purusha. So if you read the Sayana's commentary, you find those of you can read, so Sahasrapad, Sahasranetraha, Sahasrapadaha, Sahasraksha. So you can find this Purusha is of the nature of infinite number of eyes and feet and heads and so on. It's all pervading nature. Next mantra is, Idam Sarvam Purusheva, means whatever you see during waking state, with your eyes open, with your mind acting in collaboration with your eyes, what you see as visual experiences, all these constitute Purusha. So the entire creation is one spiritual entity. It's all directly linked to Advaita. Idam Vartamanam Jagat Sarvam Purusha Eva. But Sayanacharya makes no bones about it. He says Paramatma Rupa Eva. It is Paramatman alone. Remember, The same Purusha Sukta was interpreted by Ramanuja, by other non-Advaita schools of philosophers as a monotheistic creator God full of compassion and love. That interpretation is perfectly all right, no doubt about it. But we are here concerned with the Advaitic interpretation. Purusha Sukta is one of those suktas which closely fits in with the Advaitic as well as Visishtadvaitic interpretations. This is one of those suktas. But there is not much scope for interpreting in terms of dualism of Madhvacharya. But it perfectly can fit in with the Shankaracharya's Advaita interpretation as well as Ramanuja's Visishtadvaita, the non-qualified Advaitic interpretation. But sorry, it's called qualified Advaita. It's called Visishtadvaita. Both Visishtadvaita and Advaita can be accommodated when you interpret this Purusha Sukta. One may ask the question, why should we interpret both? Actually, these are two levels of human spiritual evolution. I mentioned this earlier. In our spiritual evolution, there is a gradual evolution, a gradual way of growing up spiritually. Becoming spiritually more mature. From without to within, from many to one. That's how we grow spiritually. So, somebody who worships his deity or his idea of God in any tradition, any religious tradition, even if actually a Christian can very easily worship his idea of God in the light of Purusha Sukta. But there is another aspect of Purusha Sukta that we'll discuss on a later occasion. It is called Yajnana Yajnamaya Deva, etc. Means it is also interpreted in terms of Yajna. So at that time we'll discuss this. So Purusha Sukta can be used by any religious traditions when they look upon their God as a compassionate, all-knowing reality, or going beyond that, if you reach the Advaitic level, as a transcendental, attributeless, immanent, divine principle. Both interpretations would be appropriate in the context of Purusha Sukta. But Sayanacharya is a follower of Shankaracharya. He says, Paramatma Rupa Eva. Yet Bhudam Yitcha Bhavyam. Whatever is going to happen, that Yitcha Bhavyam, and whatever has already happened, whatever belongs to the past and whatever belongs to the future, that also is Purusha Eva, the same Paramatma Rupa. So, when you mention whatever you see around you, for example, idam, during waking state, when you open your eyes, what you experience, that is the same Paramatman. Also, what belongs to the past, yad bhudam, adida jagat, and bhavishyat jagat. Adida jagat means that which belongs to the past, and bhavishyat jagat means that belongs to the future. What has already happened, what belongs to the past, what belongs to the future. The three time dimension. This Purusha is existing, pervading in all the three dimensions of time, the past, present and future, or pervading, immanent and transcendental. The word Purusha itself implies the immanent nature, and then Sahasrasha, Sahasrapa, etc. Sahasrasisha, Sahasrasha, Sahasrapa. This Purusha is endowed with 1000 heads, 1000 feet, 1000 eyes, etc. Implies its all-pervading nature. That's where the principles of Vedic hermeneutics becomes very, very important, very relevant. Because unless we understand these principles of Vedic hermeneutics, if we just read the English translation, it won't make sense. It's deeply mystical. Remember, this truth was revealed to a sage, a seer in meditation. And remember, when you are in meditation, you don't write anything. When you come out of it, when you write something which you experience in meditation, it will be an approximation of what you experienced. What you write after, see, remember, if a person collects a huge pile of papers and fountain pen, and every day he goes on writing poetry or short stories or dramas, whatever it is, as a carpenter makes furniture, that poetry, that creative literature won't be worth reading. The greatest literary work also is the greatest philosophical work. That's an important thing. Vedas are deeply metaphysical. But Vedas also constitute highly literary. The highest flights of literary mysticism is also the highest, also represent the highest flights of metaphysical contemplation. So these ideas were revealed to the sages and later they wrote. So what you write about an experience will be an approximation of what you actually experienced. This is an important thing to remember. So when you write about something that you experienced, then you can only write in this manner, all pervading. You may not write all pervading. I saw it infinite number of eyes and feet and heads and so on. And also I found it belongs to the past, belongs to the future, belongs to the present. I saw whatever I saw, it was same Purusha. And then I understood whatever belonged to the past is also the same reality. And whatever belonged to the future, also the same. So, the highest truth can be expressed only in the language of silence. Antaya Bhuvadinam Anantaya Mukham. It's come from Veda. Antaya Bhuvadinam Anantaya Mukham. The language of the infinite is silence. The language of the finite is verbosity, so to speak. So, that's why Yadbhudam Yacha Bhavyam, whatever belongs to the past and whatever belongs to the future, that is also Paramatma Rupaiva, the same Paramatman, the Supreme Self, Supreme Atman. Then Udamurdattasya Ishanaka. So very interesting is, Udamurdattasya Ishanaka means Api sa chasa amaranattusya. Swami. Amarana means deathlessness. Deathlessness. And this Paramatman, this Atman is the master of deathlessness. That's a literal translation somewhat. But Amrita means deathlessness. So Sayanajaya will say Swami, the master. What it means is, once you realize your own identity as this Atman, then you transcend death. We cannot transcend death as a physical body, at a physical level. But when we realize that our true self is not this psychophysical mechanism which can never be deathless, but Atman which is immortal, that's my true nature, that's our true nature. When we identify ourselves with this Atman, which is the real Amrutatvam, the deathlessness, then we realize our own deathless dimension, our own immortal dimension. So the poet can only use this word, this Paramatma is the master of deathlessness, means by realizing our own immortal dimension, we become immortal. That's why Amaranattusya Swami is the master of deathlessness, means immortality. So we can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. David's hand is
Thank
up
you.
first.
Thank you. Yeah.
Swami. I kind of had a two-sided question. One is, did Shankara, because of the misinterpretation of the words, and you say, Shankara kind of brought Aham Brahmarshmi, what it actually means. Did that mean, was Advaita realized by people like, Yajnavalkya, or was Advaita first realized like by Gaudapada? And what happened to spirituality before Shankara came up with what Aham Brahmarshmi means? Was it lost in India for thousands of years?
No. In fact, the same ideas you find in the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, literally. The point is, in India, there is this tradition called sampradayas, dispensations. So you find a whole group of people may claim to follow one school of thoughts. Now, here it may not be based on their experience, because they are born in that family or they are born into that tradition. So tradition becomes a limiting factor. Not every scholar belonging to Mimamsa tradition denied or rejected the Advaita aspect of Veda mantras. But the point is, many of them followed the ritualistic philosophers. So the commentators, most of the prominent commentators who appeared before Shankara happened to be the commentators belonging to the Mimamsa, the ritualistic tradition. But the great sages you find in Mahabharata, in the Ramayana, Vasishtha, the others you find, they were all Vasishtha taught pure Advaita to Rama. They said Yoga Vasishtha is nothing. Yoga Vasishtha you heard, it's a pure Advaita. Vasishtha was teaching nothing but Advaita to Rama. So Vasishtha lived long ago, long before Shankara. What happened, in India, the technical word that they use is sampradaya, means a whole dispensation. They follow, at least they claim to follow a particular interpretation of Gita or Upanishads or Vedas and things like that. For example, those who claim to follow Shankaracharya, do you think all of them have realized this Atman? Not necessarily. They belong to the particular, the word is sampradaya, means the particular. So they may mostly use this vibhuti, the ashes on the fire. But those who belong to Ramanuja Sampradaya, if we go to India, you understand. They may not have read any of Ramanuja's books. And they may not have either realized or read of any of Ramanuja's books, but they claim they are followers of Ramanuja. So they have different kinds of sandal paste, a kind of brand, they had defined. You have seen that, Then there are others who Madhva some tradition. This sandal paste is still more expressive, you find. So that's I think that has more to do with the sociology of Indian culture than philosophy. So Indian society is divided into so many dispensations. Never imagine that any person who belongs to one particular or claims to follow one particular school of philosophy has read any or all of those books. Never. It never really happens. It's not like that. See, for example, let's say in modern times, those who claim to be agnostics or atheists, they all read Christopher Hitchens or Dr. Richard Dawkins. Not necessarily. They may not know anything, but say that we decided to be an atheist agnostic. And India is mostly based on birth, not by intellectual conviction or argument or anything. Mostly based on birth. Communities, whole communities followed one particular, or claimed to follow one particular teacher. So like the Mimamsakas. So most of the commentators who wrote commentaries on Rigveda or Yajurveda, especially the Samhita Brahmana portions, mostly dealing with ritualistic portions, they gave ritualistic interpretation. But at the same time, throughout the ages, there were great monks, great nuns, great householders. See, you can find Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Janaka is a king. He's a householder, a great Advaitin. Yashapati was also a king, king of Panchala. You find many like that. So this is an important thing to remember. In India, it has more to do with the sociology of Indian society than philosophical conviction, whole dispensation. It so happened that Shankaracharya happens to be the first great system builder, philosophically speaking, the first great system builder who made an attempt to develop Advaita into compact philosophy as such, so that one can read his commentaries and you can argue, you can use the tools of epistemology and metaphysics and logic that he lays down. So Shankaracharya is the first system builder in Advaita tradition, not the first Advaita. On Vedic times, all Vedic mantras are full of Advaitic ideas, even in the Samhita portions. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Actually, please go ahead.
When I'm following.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask that this Purusha, is it the same as the Virat Roop in the Gita?
Yeah. In fact, I told you earlier there are two interpretations. One interpretation is Virat Purusha. The other one is going beyond, transcending the Virat as Atman. So the one word, Atyadishtha Dashangulam, you find the last portion of the first mantra. That means that indicates the transcendental dimension of Purusha. So, commentators like Sayana gave an Advaitic interpretation, but there are places where it is clearly the Virat Purusha. Now we are now making an academic study, very interesting study. Not that we should know clearly what Purusha is and we should do something about it. No. It's a very interesting way of studying different aspects of these ancient Vedic suttas, So you find, again you may ask the question, what's the difference between Virat Purusha and Atman? So two levels of spiritual evolution. Understanding the absolute reality as Virat Purusha, the all-pervading divine person, cosmic person, is perfectly okay, but when we evolve further spiritually, then you find the true nature of that Virat Purusha, the all-pervading cosmic person, is the all-pervading transcendental divine principle called Atman. That's a Paramatma Rupa, Sayanacharya writes. It's clear to you?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I was going to ask a very similar question on Namaskar.
Yeah, Namaskar.
The question was kind of from the academic standpoint.
Yeah.
Is the section in the Gita where it says, like, I have 1,000 eyes, I have 1,000 arms, would you say it was inspired by the Suktam?
Yeah, there are commentators who tell you that, the Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga is inspired by Purusha Sukta. As I told you earlier, Purusha Sukta is an important document. Narayana Sukta and Purusha Sukta are both important for Vaishnavites. They interpret it that way. So Vishwarupa Darshana, literally, philosophically, it is closer to Visishta Advaita. I mean, Ramanuja's interpretation of a monotheistic Godhead who is compassionate, more like the Abrahamic creator God idea. So, literally speaking, but if you go deeper, you can understand that Vedic dimension of the same reality. So, you are right. There is a tradition that Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga, the cosmic person, ideal of Gita, was inspired by Purusha Sukta. Yeah.
Maharaj, there's a question from YouTube.
Yeah.
when you refer to the Vedas as the highest metaphysical texts of mysticism and how they're meant to be interpreted in a poetic sense, is this to be regarded as a lila, divine pastimes of Sri Krishna, is the way the question is phrased?
Yeah, certainly there are devotees of Sri Krishna who consider that everything is lila of Krishna. For them it's perfectly okay. You know, Advaita never rejects any view. This is the only view, that view is wrong. Advaita, from Advaitic perspective, there cannot be a wrong view. There can be only one view, but perhaps when we go further, you'll understand the Leela and Krishna himself are the same. You know, that's the idea. Means creation and creator are the same. That's the idea behind.
Maharaj, I have a question about Sayanacharya. In the Advaita lineage of the teachers, you said that he comes about 250, maybe
Not
300 years after
Sayana maybe more than 300 years after Shankara. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And his prominence is quite large?
Yeah, he's very prominent figure because he's the one who wrote commentaries on all the four Vedas. No one has written commentaries on all the four Vedas. His predecessors, Mahidhara and others, they didn't write on everything. Sayana's great contribution is, he was linked to, his tradition was linked to Vijayanagara Empire, which he acted in a way as a custodian of Hindu heritage for almost 300 years in the south. Yeah.
Maharaj, there's a question, hand raised by Mark.
Yeah, most welcome, Mark. Yeah.
Pranam, Maharaj. When we began our discussion of the Purusha Suktam, I went online and I looked up a translation. And one of the statements that it says on here, it says, though the Purusha Suktam is difficult to explain, a difficult text to explain, the Purusha Sukta gives us the essence of the philosophy of Vedanta.
Yeah.
Would you say that's correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I don't think, of course, it's not difficult to explain because Sayana has done a very beautiful, quite simple, very simple Sanskrit commentary on Purusha Sukta in the Rigveda Samhita. Of course, Sayana is mostly, my teaching is based on Sayana's commentary because that too, you know, as I mentioned, Purusha Sukta, according to some other Vedic shakhas, somewhat bigger, sometimes shorter, but the most authentic version of any Vedic mantras should be linked to Rigvedic tradition because that's the oldest of the four Vedas and most fundamental. 16 mantras of the 90th sukta in the 10th mandala. That's what we are discussing. That view is perfectly okay, perfectly correct. Yeah.
What was the name of the interpreter that you mentioned?
Sayana. Yes.
How is that spelled?
Yes, Ayana.
Sayana.
Yeah. Yes, Ayana. Yeah. Sayana.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maharaj, there aren't any hands up, but I'm going to ask something.
Yeah.
The Vedic hermeneutics, does it require just a little leap of the poetic imagination so that things aren't taken literally?
You know, the hermeneutics is important only when you try to give a philosophical and mystical interpretation to the poetry. But poetry by itself is enjoyable because there are wonderful imageries, for example. All the rivers, the flow, the ocean, and when they reach Yadha Nadyasya Yandamana Samudri Astam Gacchandi Namarupe Vikhaya Tata Namarupa Vimuktaha Parat Param Purusham Upayati Divyam. All in all, these rivers, we empty their waters in the ocean and they drop their individual names and they become one with the ocean. And there are other, this is from, surprisingly it's found in Mandukya Mundaka Upanishad, we say Atharva Veda, but actually it's a mantra from Rigveda Samhita. It's a Samhita mantra from Rigveda. So there are many, even some of the rivers which are still flowing in India, Imamme, Gange, Yamune, Saraswati, Purusha, all the rivers are rivers Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati. Saraswati, of course, has disappeared. And also their tributaries are all mentioned in the Rigveda Samhita. So, Sayanacharya says, Pratana Nadyas Tisra, Avayava Nadyas Sapta. So he says there are three important rivers and 7 tributaries. So Sayanacharya writes like that. So many of these great mantras can be absolutely wonderful examples of most sublime poetry. But when you use the tools of hermeneutics, then you bring out higher meaning, the metaphysical implications. Then you find they all are highly metaphysical and highly Advaitic. As I mentioned earlier, many of these suktas can also be highly Visishta Advaitic, very close to Ramanuja's system of philosophy. Okay, thank you.
I follow Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yogi's
you.
hand is up.
So thank you everyone.
There's a question from Yogi.
Most welcome, Yogi. Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaskar.
I read somewhere that if we do not chant the Suktam or any of the Vedic chants without properly following the meter, for example, Purusha Suktam without following the
Purusha Suktam follows the meter, Anushtup Chanda. Purusha Suktam follows Anushtup. Yeah.
It gives us demerit or bad karma, leads to hell. Is that strictly interpreted that way?
In Purusha Suktam? In the Vedic, generally Vedic literature?
Yeah.
Oh, Vedic literature, there are many places where the verses are highly, they don't deal necessarily with higher philosophy. There are many verses which have got only literary merit, not philosophical merit. There are verses which talk about war, and there are many things. You can find the picture of a very vigorous, dynamic society, and also, but you don't find the kind of those people will go to hell. It is mentioned, but they are not taken very seriously. The hell idea found in the Puranas or even some of the Vedic literature is not taken very seriously by Vedantins or readers of the Vedas. They don't pay so much of attention to the hell idea, not the same attention that you find in the Abrahamic traditions. This is an important thing. Otherwise, in Puranas are full of references to any number of hells. Kumbhi, where they do all sorts of terrible things to people. But people don't care. They are all just some of them, they are not taken very seriously. It's an important thing. The hell idea is not taken very seriously. Such ideas are there in some of the mantras, but not taken very seriously. There is plenty of war also in Rig Veda, plenty of fighting. Those things are there. But that's why the whole Rig Veda Samhita is not exclusively metaphysical or spiritual. There are wonderful verses which are gems of the highest spiritual ideas and metaphysics. That's what I say. Not every mantra needs to be taken as most sublime, spiritual, metaphysical. There are verses which reflect the sociology of those times, the lifestyle of those times, the social struggles and conflicts of those times, all are mentioned here. So you can find. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Akshay, you're next.
I wanted to ask that I have heard that Gita is a secondary praman, but like I have felt that it's like why it is secondary, because it is so important.
Okay, now when you talk about pramanas, we are talking about three fundamental canonical literature, means fundamental traditions. One is Vedas, Suti Pramana. The second is Smriti Prasthana, that is Gita. And the third tradition is Brahma Sutras. Not least important, but these are three. Now here, Gita is only a commentary of Vedanta. Gita is supreme because in Gita, in 700 verses, you find all the most sublime teachings of all the four Vedic traditions are enshrined in the Gita. Samasta Vedartha Sara Sangraha Bhudam Durviknyayartham. Shankaracharya in his Bodhgata commentary says, Gita is the condensation of the essence of all Vedantic ideas. So Gita assumed so much of importance because Shankaracharya in 8th century wrote a commentary. Before Shankaracharya's commentary came into existence, Gita as we understand today was not such a celebrated tradition or book. This is an important thing to understand. Gita, the earliest and most authentic interpretation, and of course by far the best interpretation is Shankara's interpretation. And in that book, he interpreted Gita as the condensation of all the most sublime spiritual and philosophical teachings of all the four Vedas. Samasta Vedartha Sara Sangraha Bhudam means condensation of the essence of Vedas. So it became so prominent. But that Gita itself is a commentary of Upanishads of Vedanta. So which should be more important? The commentary comes only after the book on which the commentary is written. Isn't it so? So that's why Vedas are important, the first, then Gita, and then of course Brahma Sutras, which logically analyzes the important statements from the Vedantic, mostly from Upanishads, and establishes the idea that Advaita is the essential, the essence of all the four Vedas. So please remember, Gita is important, but Gita is mentioned and second only because Gita is based on Vedanta, means Upanishads. And Upanishads are the most sublime teachings of Vedas. Remember, Vedanta means the essence of Vedas, the last word of Vedas. So naturally, Upanishads should come first as pramana, then only Gita, but actually they are of equal importance. That's why at the end of each chapter, Gita is often equated to Upanishad, Upanishadsu, Gita-su, Upanishadsu. So Gita is called an Upanishad, is equated to Upanishad. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Maharaj, there's if you'll permit, there's one last question from you.
Most welcome. Yeah.
Shankaracharya says to ignore the scriptures if your own experience conflicts with them. Do any other scriptures or texts before Shankara discuss this concept?
Oh, anything that ignores. See, remember, in the highest sense, your ultimate mandate is your own experience. At the same time, scriptures are not to be ignored because scriptures are important because scriptures teach you about things that your sensory perception cannot teach you. Scriptures are important. See, when you open your eyes, you don't see Atman or anything there. So actually, in a way it is true. We understand higher things of even worldly experiences only when we close our eyes and think. When you just open our eyes and try to look at things, we get something. But the true nature of what we see with our eyes, we can infer only when we close our eyes and think. Mind goes deeper into what you have seen openly. Now, scriptures tell you what the eyes and ears and the sense of touch and smell and taste cannot teach us. So that is why alaukikam means that which is not worldly, that doesn't belong to the empirical. That higher wisdom is the gift of the scriptures. But again, after studying the scriptures, we should reason and then we should make it our experience. But one important point is our experience should not contradict reason. Our experience can go beyond reason. Our experience should not contradict scriptures, but our experience can go beyond scriptures. Should not contradict, but should go beyond. It may go beyond, but will not contradict. That's the idea behind. Scriptures and reason can join together, but experience actually transcends both. Yeah.
Very excellent, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for those wonderful questions. We'll conclude today and we'll continue next week. Most welcome. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you everyone for wonderful questions. Yeah.